Good afternoon and happy Women's History Month. The Michigan Women's Commission is delighted once again to collaborate with the Michigan Center for Data and Analytics to bring you the second Women in Michigan Workforce Report. And I need to say a big thank you to Leo, the Labor and Economic Opportunity Department of the state, and especially to Stephanie Beckhorn, Deputy Director, Employment and Training within Leo, for commissioning this very important report. Now, the first Women in Michigan Workforce Report was released in 2021. At that time, there were nearly 136,000 women who had left the workforce entirely in Michigan. And while we know that there's nothing good about the pandemic and what happened, during that period, there was this light that shone on the child care challenges we face. So this prompted Governor Whitmer to ask the Michigan Women's Commission, which I'm delighted to chair, to pilot the Michigan Tri-Share Child Care Program, saving families thousands of dollars and providing Michigan employers who are willing to assist their employees with child care costs. Additionally, Governor Whitmer and the legislature invested $1.4 billion in Caring for Michigan Future, which has already created 1,000 new child care providers in the state. Governor Whitmer understands that child care and giving care is the backbone of our economy, and that women bear the brunt of that responsibility. As women, we lose nearly $300,000 in earning over a lifetime, eating into our retirement savings and costing us wages and promotions. This is why she introduced a caregiver tax credit of up to $5,000 in her fiscal 25 budget. She is also investing in pre-K for all and tuition-free college and certificate opportunities. The Michigan Women's Commission is excited to roll up our sleeves and continue to work with the governor and the legislature to make these initiatives a reality. Now, for the report, please welcome Trisha Schlegel. Trisha was the main author of the report. She is an economic analysis person with the Michigan Center for Data and Analytics. She has been with the center for nearly 4 years and focuses on data research and analysis. Trisha holds a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Michigan. She enjoys hiking, playing soccer, and trying new coffee shops in her free time. Trisha?
Thank you so much, Dr. Geneva. I'm going to share my screen and get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Trisha Schlegel. I am an economic analyst with the Michigan Center for Data and Analytics. Today, I have been given the opportunity to provide a brief overview on our Women in the Michigan Workforce Report. First, I would like to introduce the Michigan Center for Data and Analytics. The MCDA provides the state with the expertise to analyze data, understand challenges, and evaluate solutions. Through data, reporting, and analysis, the MCDA provides partners with the information and insights they need to make evidence-based decisions. I would also like to acknowledge our partners who fund this research on behalf of the MCDA. We thank Director Stephanie Beckhorn from the Office of Employment and Training in the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity and other partners within LEO in their support of this report. The reason this report is important, I hope, is obvious. It's the reason we are all here today. But women make up just under 50% of the Michigan labor force. Addressing issues that impact women's earnings, education, and the ability to participate in the labor force is in the best interest of the Michigan economy. Just a very brief overview of some of the main findings we discuss in our report. The full report is about 30 pages of content. Michigan workforce. Of course, I wish I could get into all of it today. I had a lot of fun writing this report, but over these next few minutes, I'd like to highlight some of the biggest areas of consideration. To start off, we will look at earnings. Michigan women ages 16 and older who worked full-time year-round in 2022 earned approximately 81 cents per dollar that men earned. This gap is widened when we look at different demographics such as race and ethnicity and educational attainment. We will then look at labor force trends. Women ages 16 and older had a labor force participation rate of 57% in the latest data compared to 67% for men. Women are also more likely to have their labor force participation impacted by the presence of children in the home. Lastly, we will look at educational attainment in the state. Approximately 66% of women ages 25 and older in Michigan had some level of post-secondary education compared to 62% of men in 2022. To start in on the earnings component, we have a bar graph here showing median earnings in Michigan by gender and work status. What we can see within this chart is that median earnings for women in Michigan who worked full-time year-round in 2022 were just under $50,000 compared to an average of more than $61,000 for men. This represents the 81 cents per dollar previously mentioned. When including part-time workers, the gap expands to women earning 68 cents per dollar that male counterparts earned. So we can see that earnings disparities exist regardless of working full or part-time. These wage gaps are also observed throughout every U.S. state, showing that it is not a Michigan-specific issue. As I mentioned in the beginning, differences in earnings are further exacerbated when looking at race and ethnicity. Within each race and ethnicity category, wage gaps exist between men and women. However, these disparities are even more stark when directly compared to white non-Hispanic men. The chart displayed here represents median full-time earnings by gender and race and ethnicity in Michigan. Women are represented in the lighter color and are on the left side of the data bars, and men in the darker color on the right. White non-Hispanic men who worked full-time in 2022 earned an average of nearly $64,200. White non-Hispanic women earned 79 cents per dollar compared to white non-Hispanic men. Black or African American women earned 68 cents on the dollar. And lastly, Hispanic women earned roughly 67 cents on the dollar compared to white non-Hispanic men. Educational attainment is another important way to view earning disparities. Here, the bars represent earnings for women as a percentage of men's by educational attainment for those 25 and older. The takeaway here is that with increased educational attainment, the relative gap in earnings between women and men is reduced on average. However, it does not completely eliminate the disparity. Women with a bachelor's degree earned approximately 67% of what their male counterparts earned in 2022. My personal preference is to think of this as 67 cents on the dollar. The reduction in the gap in earnings is slow, but gradual between those with less than a high school diploma up to a bachelor's degree. But then between a bachelor's degree and a graduate or professional degree, the gap is reduced by an average of roughly 4.5 cents on the dollar. This highlights the need for women to obtain these increased levels of educational attainment in order to reduce the earnings disparity. Here, we have the same data used in the previous slide, but put into numerical gaps rather than percent-based. Women's average earnings are shown in the lighter dots on the left side of the data bars. What is noticeable here that is not visible in the previous chart is that although women typically need higher levels of educational attainment to reduce the relative gap in earnings compared to male counterparts, with each increased level of education, the total gap in earnings actually increases. Women in Michigan who go on to obtain a bachelor's degree or higher earned over $25,000 less than male counterparts on average in 2022. These education categories are standard in the data provided by the U.S. Census Bureau, and we know that individuals with some college or associate degree represent a wide group. But what stands out among this group is that women are earning less than $40,000 per year on average, whereas men in the group are closer to $50,000. Now, this is not to say that increased educational attainment is a bad thing, because it is not. It actually has a very positive impact on average earnings. And to recall the last slide, it helps close that percent gap. But it is important to see how the total numerical differences in earnings change with education. The good news is that there's much more to be said on this topic within the report, so please feel free to check that out if you are interested to know more. Earnings and poverty rates are also closely connected. Women in Michigan earn less than their male counterparts and are also more likely to be impacted by poverty. This chart shows average poverty rates for women by race and ethnicity. The orange dashed line represents the average rate of 14.6% for all women in Michigan. And the dark line represents the rate of 12.1% for all men in Michigan. What stands out is that only 2 groups of women fall below these average lines for all men and women in Michigan. Women who are Black or African American experienced a poverty rate that was more than double the average rate for women who are white non-Hispanic. Shifting to our labor force component of today's conversation, women in Michigan have a lower labor force participation rate than men. This gap also exists at the national level. The chart shown is displaying the average total labor force by gender in Michigan in thousands. The numbers provided are for those aged 16 and older. The data labels near the middle of the visual represent the lowest recorded labor force numbers for each group over the time frame. What we can see in this chart is that during the pandemic, labor force numbers for both men and women declined. However, the total labor force for women declined more and has been slower to recover. The last time we looked at this in a report, we were near the bottom of the labor force for women due to pandemic-related losses. At their lowest point, women in Michigan were showing a loss of around 150,000 labor force participants. By the beginning of 2022, we can see the labor force line for men beginning to separate more, eventually leading to a greater labor force by the end of 2023 than observed prior to the pandemic. The labor force for women has been on a steady increase since the later part of 2022 and is very nearly recovered. However, we are still observing a remaining loss of roughly 2,000 women as of the end of 2023. I want to point out that this chart has a lot to look at, but what we have here are reasons why women and men are not looking for work. This survey is conducted at the national level, and these individuals are not in the labor force, nor are they actively trying to participate. There are many reasons why an individual may not be looking for work, but the results of this survey show women were far more likely than men to cite family responsibilities and childcare arrangements as reasons why. Focusing on childcare arrangements specifically, around 4% of women say this prevents them from looking, compared to less than 1% of men. Family responsibilities is near the top of this visual, with nearly a quarter of female respondents marking this as their reason, compared to just 10% of men. This guides us into our next point of conversation, where we see that women's labor force participation is more likely to be impacted by the presence of children than men. Data shown here is collected at the national level for those between 25 and 54 years of age. What we are looking at is labor force participation rates by parents and non-parents and ages of children. We know that individuals with children under 5 in the home are more likely to be on the younger end of this age group, but what stands out is that nationally, women with children under 5 had a labor force participation rate of 74%. This is far lower than all other groups of parents and non-parents in 2023. The difference between men and women with children under 5 is greater than 20 percentage points. What is also worth noting within this data is that nationwide, women in this age group without children had the greatest participation rates of any female category. This highlights the impact on women's labor force participation more so than men's as a result of young children in the household. Now, to focus on education for the next little bit. Education plays a major role in shaping economic outcomes, as it often leads to higher earnings and reductions in poverty. On average, women in Michigan are more highly educated than men, but still face earning disparities. Shown here are the number of men and women ages 25 and older who have obtained each of the listed levels of educational attainment. Women outpace men in both the categories of some college or associate degree and bachelor's degree or higher. This equates to roughly 66% of women holding some level of post-secondary education in the state, compared to about 62% of men. After looking at the information on the previous slide, we wanted to know who has been earning the new degrees and certificates in Michigan. The answer to that question is women. Women earned nearly 60% of the total new degrees and certificates awarded throughout the state during the 2021 to 2022 academic year. Although women earned nearly 60% of the degrees and certificates in 2022, they are underrepresented in STEM fields, which are typically high demand, high wage opportunities. This graphic displays the share of women and men who completed various STEM programs. For women, these shares varied widely from 25% in engineering to 64% in biological and biomedical sciences. In general, popular degree programs for women include healthcare, business management, marketing and related services, education, and psychology, to name a few. I know that was a lot of information in a short period of time, so let me summarize all of the items just discussed. Women earn less than men, regardless of full or part-time work status, and this is not a Michigan-specific issue. In connection with earnings, poverty is more likely to impact women than men. The disparities in earnings and poverty are only further realized when broken down by different demographics, such as race and ethnicity and education. The total Michigan labor force was impacted during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, numbers for women declined more and have been slower to recover. Women also participate in the labor force at a rate below men's and are more likely to have their participation impacted by the presence of young children in the home. Women in Michigan are more educated on average and are earning a significant portion of new degrees and certificates awarded within the state. However, they are underrepresented in STEM and other fields that are often high wage, high demand opportunities. Having all of this information in one place is important because it helps illustrate the number and complexity of barriers that women face in the workplace. Although our report is unable to provide recommendations or define specific causes behind much of these issues, we hope to provide valuable insight to outcomes faced by women in the Michigan workforce. You can find our executive summary and full report at the Michigan Center for Data and Analytics website listed here. Additional topics analyzed in the report that I unfortunately did not get a chance to touch on today include patterns of work, employment and earnings by industries and occupations, registered apprenticeships, and more. I do want to note that most of the data analyzed comes from the U.S. Census Bureau, and the most recent year of data is 2022. We will, however, get to look at 2023 data after their release this upcoming fall. Other than our website, the MCDA also offers additional resources listed here. Thank you so much for having me today. If there are any questions or inquiries about the research we do, please reach out to the email listed here or go to our website to find our general contact information. With that, I will turn it back to Dr. Geneva.
Thank you so much, Trisha. That was an excellent report. Very well done. Thank you and your colleagues at the Michigan Center for Data and Analytics. I do have some questions, and they may be on people's minds as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about the earnings gap for full-time workers? And has this changed since the last time the report was released?
That is a great question. I can certainly touch on that a bit more. So we mainly discussed this gap of 81 cents on the dollar for full-time year-round workers in Michigan. And I'm sure many of us here today are aware that Equal Pay Day was March 12th of this year, which marks the number of days into the year that women typically have to work in order to earn what male counterparts did in the previous year. This is not determined by the Michigan gap of 81 cents per dollar. It's actually determined by the gap of 84 cents, which is the national average. So this shows us that Michigan is slightly behind that national gap. But to answer your question of if this has changed since the last report was released, yes, we have. In our last report, we were seeing a gap of 78 cents on the dollar for full-time year-round workers in 2019. So what this means is that the gap closed by about 3 percentage points or 3 cents on the dollar within those 3 years of data. So even if we look back maybe a decade ago in 2012, we were seeing a gap of 74 cents on the dollar. And so this shows us that that gap is very slowly closing, which is positive news.
Okay.
We know that the pandemic shifted a lot of things in the workplace as well. So it'll be very interesting to see where that gap takes us in these next few years of data.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so closing slowly, a little bit of progress, but still more work to be done.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, Trisha, you also mentioned in the report near the end that the report contains information on employment and earnings by industry and occupational groups. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the report found there?
Absolutely. There's so much around this topic within the report. There's actually about 4 pages of content on this topic alone. And it's another one of those items I wish I could spend even more time talking about today. But to keep it brief, we see women holding the majority employment in just 6 of the 17 main occupational groups in the state. The reason we keep it to the occupational group level is because there are 700 to 800 individual occupations defined at the federal level. And so we unfortunately cannot explore every single one of these within the report. But even at the occupational group level, there's still a lot of valuable information. And part of what we see within the report is that the occupational areas where women hold the majority of employment, most are typically service related. So these are occupational areas like healthcare support, personal care and service, communication services, things of that nature. We do have a chart within the report showing the percent of employment that women hold in each of the occupational groups. And we also have one showing the average earnings for women and men in each of these areas. And what we saw with earnings is that there are no occupational groups where women earned more than men in 2022. It's important to note that even though the areas women tend to hold the majority of employment are service related, and these are oftentimes lower paid areas, the disparity in earnings cannot be fully explained by women selecting these careers like healthcare support. Even if we take a closer look at some of those specific occupations in healthcare support, for example, like medical assistants or home health and personal care aides, these are both occupations that we know are typically lower average earnings, but women still earn less than their male counterparts in these same occupations. So unfortunately, as I mentioned before, our report cannot speak to the causality behind these pay disparities, but we do hope to spark those valuable conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the reasons why a report like this is so important to us at the Michigan Women's Commission is because it does give that it puts a spotlight on the data, the facts, what's happening, and gives us that opportunity to make decisions based upon the evidence, based upon the numbers, what they're saying, as well as create programs, which of course the governor has done and we're doing. So very much, again, appreciate you highlighting that for us. I also want to talk a little bit about the educational attainment today. You mentioned that, but there are also areas like apprenticeship training. And we are taking a big look and a lot of action in that area. Apprenticeships, registered apprenticeships, and creating those opportunities for women to get in and enjoy and learn about new opportunities and skills. Can you speak to women's involvement in registered apprenticeships?
Absolutely. This is an exciting topic because the share of women in registered apprenticeships is growing. So in 2023, women accounted for about 10% of all active apprentices in the state. And I know that share sounds small, but it was just over 8% in 2014. So it is important to see that there is growth here. The section on registered apprenticeships is something that is new within this report. After our previous release, we wanted to take the opportunity to expand on education and other training within the state, and registered apprenticeships are a large part of that. It ended up being one of the largest sections in the report just because there's so much information to cover on the individuals who complete these programs. In the report, we also cover information around industries, occupations, demographics, all within registered apprenticeship. What we see is that women typically complete programs outside of the traditional industries of manufacturing and construction, but they do still show representation in these areas. One of the occupations we make note of in the report is operating engineers, and that's because it's one of the biggest apprenticeship occupations in the state, and women make up about 11% of the apprentices in this occupation, which is important because it's slightly larger than their overall share within the state. But like I said, this section is expansive. It has a lot of good information, and we hope to see even more data collection around women in registered apprenticeships because it's such a valuable workforce development tool.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we would agree. We've been focusing on that as a priority, this whole idea of pathways to higher wage jobs. And we started a series of roundtables with the governor in November. And so our goal was to promote these pathways to higher wage job for women, as well as educate employers on the unique barriers that women face in entering and remaining in the workforce. And so we had a roundtable with Accenture's IT apprenticeship program, and then we're going to be in Jackson for a second roundtable with Consumer Energy and highlighting their skilled trades apprenticeship program in April. And so this is really an area that we believe at the commission holds bright promise for women in Michigan. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And it seems that the report clearly speaks to that as well.
Yeah, we just wanted to include as much information as we possibly could on registered apprenticeships. And I think it definitely highlights women very well in these areas. And I'm excited for everyone to read and see what we have in there.
Mm-hmm. And certainly people who want to get more information, they can certainly get the report from you. And we're so delighted they can go to your website. And so we're just delighted that anyone and everyone will be able to get their hands on this report, and just perfect timing. Let's welcome the governor of our great state, Governor Whitmer.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry, I was muted when I first started speaking. Even after all these years, I sometimes still speak when I'm muted. Dr. Geneva, I'm glad to be with you. Appreciate your introduction. And I thank you, Trisha and DTMB, Michigan Center for Data and Analytics, for publishing this report. And I want to thank, of course, the Michigan Women's Commission for bringing us all together. Today, I want to talk for a little bit about the work we've done and continue to do to expand economic opportunity for women and our families. We know that our most powerful asset is our people, and Michiganders are tough, we're hardworking, and we're kind, especially the women. And if given a fair shot and equal opportunity, we can do extraordinary things. And policymakers and action takers, our task is really clear, and it's to deliver for the people of our state. So that's why, since taking office, I've really been focused on getting things done for people that make a tangible difference in their lives. I always, as a working mom myself, I always think about education, I think about childcare, think about the disproportionate responsibility that falls on women's shoulders. And that's why we've made record bipartisan investments in education to improve student outcomes. That's why we've focused on growing the teaching profession and creating scholarships to put more aspiring educators on a path to the classroom. We're now paying our student teachers and helping full-time teachers pay back their student loans that they had to take out to become teachers in the first place. We all know that in professions like these, women are a disproportionate number of teachers. We want to make sure that they feel supported. We want to make sure that they save money as they pursue this noble, invaluable career in education. You know, I heard from a woman named Tina. She lives in Dexter, and she wrote to me about her daughter, Emma, who is about to graduate from Eastern. And Emma's in student teaching at a preschool in Dexter. She's looking for a job and wants to teach pre-K, but noted that the wages are too low. So I agree, right? We all agree, I think. And we need to pay educators more at every single level. Together, we need to ensure that we've got skilled, qualified teachers in every classroom. And I want to highlight the TriShare childcare program. We piloted this, the Michigan Women's Commission specifically did. This is a program that slashes the cost of childcare for working families by 2/3. The state picks up a third, the employer picks up a third, and the family picks up a third. And this is something that's really been incredibly successful, and it started here. Our new department that I created recently called My Leap is going to be taking over the program after strong stewardship by the Women's Commission. So we're handing it over, but I think that it's gotten off to such a great start and had such positive and powerful impact. Next, I want to talk a little bit about taxes. We have, with this new legislative majority, we quintupled the working families tax credit. So we put a combined average refund of about $3,100 in the pockets of 700,000 families. And the best part of this policy is it's parents who are working full time, but still can't get ahead. And when we give people this kind of tax support, it impacts the kids of Michigan. Half the children in Michigan live in these households with a full-time working parent. And so checks have been hitting people's mailbox over the last few weeks, giving families, including all these kids, a little more breathing room in their budgets. And I share a story from a woman named Rachel, who was in Wixom, wrote to my office and shared that she works as a substitute teacher, often worries about how to just pay the bills. And with the bigger check that she got, she and her daughters are eating 3 meals a day and paying rent without worrying. That's how slim the margins are for so many people in public education in our communities across the state. And so when we help by having some common sense policies on the books, more women and more kids can have a little breathing room. Last thing I wanted to highlight is economic opportunity. So I just introduced the budget. I proposed what I'm calling the Michigan Guarantee, so that every child can go to pre-K. So this is universal pre-K for 4-year-olds and community college after high school, so that we can grow our economy, grow our skill sets, and ensure that people make more money, right? Can get out of poverty. We know that a 2-year degree from a community college averages about $23,000 a year in enhanced income. So this free community college builds on our efforts to offer paths to higher education and skills training. I've met so many Michiganders who were able to go back to school because of the Michigan Reconnect or Futures for Frontliners, and this is just an extension of creating that kind of opportunity for every high school graduate. So we've made a lot of progress, and some of those most important conversations I was just mentioning are women who are raising children or are just starting out their careers, who didn't have the resources to get that community college degree, but because of one of these programs is now entering an important line of work where they'll be fulfilled and make enough money to live a good quality of life. And that's what it's really all about. So we've made some progress here in Michigan, a lot of good progress in Michigan. We, of course, have to be very clear-eyed, though. The truth is that women who work full-time year-round still earn 81 cents on the dollar to men, and it's even less for women of color. And the truth is that our labor force participation in Michigan is 10% below the men's rate. So women, we know, are more likely also to hold multiple jobs. So the truth is that we're underrepresented in STEM careers, in apprenticeships, and as higher wage careers. We can fix this, though. We know this, and we can fix this. We can close the gaps, we can uplift women, and in the process, build a more prosperous economy for everyone. So I want to thank you. I know that this commission is doing incredible work. This commission is populated by some of the most fascinating, exciting, and thoughtful women I know. And I know that if we give every woman in our state a fair shot, we're going to see extraordinary strides for individuals, for families, but also for our mutual economy. If you caught my State of the State, you might have noticed that I talked about one person during that State of the State, and a woman named Elaine. She grew up very poor. She's from Michigan. She was one of 7 kids. After graduating from Saginaw High School, she worked a lot of odd jobs, got married, and moved to Chicago. She got divorced and had 2 sons to raise, and so she moved back home to Michigan and really struggled as a single mom. She worked hard, though, and she used food stamps to put food on the table and housing assistance to keep a roof over their heads. She was a secretary for years, but eventually decided to chase her dream and went back to Wayne State on a Pell Grant. She earned 2 degrees and graduated with her master's in social work. Like, she does this important work to help other people. And she's retired now, but she still volunteers in shelters. And I think that it was just such a powerful story because she, overcame a lot of odds, but each step of the way, there was a little bit of assistance or a little bit of help that made it possible. So I share that story with all of you because I think that I've never met anyone interesting that's had an easy life, but anything we as a state or a community or people can do to make another woman's burden lighter by, eviscerating a barrier or simply making something a little easier to navigate, I think is important work, and I'm grateful for your leadership in it.
Thank you so much, Governor. We appreciate you. We celebrate you for your leadership and your foresight, and happy Women's History Month to you.
Thank you. You too, Geneva.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Well, we are so excited. We want to thank the governor again and Trisha for that excellent report and her colleagues at the center. And we want you also to know a little bit about why this is important to us as a commission. Our mission is to hear and listen to the issues facing women. And we decided straight up that the way to do that was to go and talk and listen and do these kinds of surveys to help identify the challenges that women face so that we can recommend policy and develop initiatives and programs to address those challenges. So going around the state for the past few years has been very important. And having this report, number 2 of the report, really made a difference. And everywhere we went, we heard that the priorities were mainly economic security issues, with affordable and accessible childcare right at the top of the list. So this kind of information that we have now helps us focus on what's important and be able to create the kind of action that we know will make an impact. Thank you to all of you who have joined us today. You may catch the recording on the Michigan Women's Commission's Facebook page, YouTube channel, and LinkedIn, as well as in the chat. For those of you who are joining and can check out the chat, we have the link to the report there. Thank you so much for being with us, and remember, we can fix this. Thank you, and happy Women's History Month.